Hey guys, and welcome back to Justin Reads Romance. I'm Justin, and today we're going to be talking about some books that everyone else seems to like, but I just don't. I do want to note that the intentions of this video is not to bash these books or say that you should feel more like I feel. It's just I want to express what did not work for me in these books, why I don't feel the general consensus of I'm in love with this book. Like, I want to dissect it. Why don't I like it? What makes my reading experience so much different from a lot of others? So if you like these books that were mentioned, it is not intended to offend you, and it's not saying like, oh, you missed this. Reading is subjective. You bring your own experiences to reading. Something may just not sit well with me because of something that I've experienced in the past, or a person that I knew in the past, or just because it's not my favorite trope or it's a pet peeve of mine. Who knows? Just something about these books just did not work. And so I'm going to start talking about the books that I feel like a lot of people like, and I'm just in the minority. The first book I want to talk about is The Bromance Book Club by Lysa K. Adams. I didn't enjoy this book at all. I really struggled with finding anything that I enjoyed about it. I like the idea of it. I like the idea of a marriage in trouble, and that he starts reading romance to try and figure out how he can win back his wife, because he still loves her even though their marriage is troubled. But there were quite a few things that did not work for me, and it was the fact that their marriage was so troubled before the inciting incident that was like the final straw. And that was because Gavin discovers that his wife Thea has been faking orgasms for the past 3 years, 3 whole years. And she did not trust her husband enough to just help him out in the bedroom, like help him help you. You know what I'm saying? So he reacted badly. I'm not arguing that. Like, his reaction was like ridiculous, selfish, self-centered, spoiled boy, little man syndrome, whatever. But he knows he reacted badly. He knows that he was completely out of line, and he needs to grovel and do better, and he needs to figure out how to please his wife. But the no orgasms and no communication for 3 years is not even just the tip of the iceberg. She is feeling stifled in her professional life. She feels like she put away her professional life to support him in his baseball career. She hates the wag lifestyle, and she feels a little bit bullied by some of the other wives, and just feels inferior. A lot of it has to do with her upbringing, with her parents, and how she came along. There's just a lot to unpack about Thea, just herself. And she never really talks to Gavin about any of this, so I guess it's not surprising that it took her 3 years to accidentally mention that no, she did not come. Another thing that I really disliked was the interference of her sister. Her sister was a lot, and I really hated her for the way that she interfered when Thea was giving Gavin a second chance, or at least a chance to prove that he wants to work. Like, she's not saying like, yes, I'll for sure take you back. She's just like, I need to see some action. I need to see that you're taking, my wants and needs into consideration. I need proof before I give you another shot. And her sister is so against the idea, and it's really for a selfish reason. She just says like, I feel like once you got married to him, you had no time for me anymore. And to the point where the sister interferes and belittles Gavin in front of his twin daughters and like upsets them. And I'm just like, oh my God, butt out. This is not your marriage. What are you doing? If your sister wants to work at it, like, I understand if this was like an abusive relationship, but like, she wants to work at it with her husband, it's none of your damn business. Get out of this conversation. I hated her, and I will not read her story because I disliked her so much. And then we come to the book club aspect of it. I really liked the fact that he wanted to read romance to figure out what his wife liked, because his wife liked to read romance. I didn't love the interjections of the story because it reflected too perfectly with the scenarios, what was happening in Gavin and Thea's life. Everything that was happening in the book, there was a scenario that exactly reflected what just happened in the book. I was like, that's too perfect, it's too curated. And I would like to have seen like romance novels plus like sex help novels and like other avenues of it, because avenues of exploration to spice up their sex life, and for him to learn actual how to give his wife pleasure. Because, and spoilers if you have not read it, when they finally do sleep together, I didn't feel like anything had changed in, like, he didn't learn anything. He didn't learn how to pleasure his wife. She didn't learn how to speak and tell him this is what I like. Not really. I felt like the first sex scene just fell flat. I was expecting like some direction, like this is what I like, this is how to get me off. And also I didn't understand the sister's like, aha, I caught him doing something bad when she discovered he was reading romance novels to try to fix his marriage. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to read romance novels to like get a clue, develop your emotional side, I don't see what was the issue. I get like copying exactly what happened in the book, but that was because it was so like the scenarios. Like, why not copy it? But anyway. All right, moving on. We have other books to talk about. The next book is Only When It's Us by Chloe Lees. I didn't hate this book. I gave it a 3 stars, but I just don't love it as much as everyone else does. I like the characters. I really love the diversity that Chloe Lees is including in her books. I think she is a really good writer. I just did not mesh well with this enemies to lovers trope because it's not enemies to lovers. The only person who thinks it's enemies, the hero and the heroine are enemies with each other, is the actual heroine. And the hero is so confused by this. Like, I don't understand why she's being so mean sometimes. So the initial misunderstanding was because the hero is deaf and he is getting notes in this college class that Willa is kind of failing at, and she has to ask him. The professor is just like, if you want help, you need to ask him because he has the notes, and you haven't really been making an effort to get the notes. You've been asking me like last minute, and I know you're busy with like your soccer stuff, but you need to like make an effort in my class, show me that you care about this grade. So whenever she whispers to him that, hey, psst, I hear you have notes, and he doesn't respond, she immediately like hates him, and it's because he's deaf and she doesn't know. But when she discovers it, I don't understand why she hates him after that. Like, I just don't get why she hates Ryder, why she feels like he is her nemesis. She says it a bunch of times, like, oh no, you're my nemesis, I can't like you. And she always catches herself whenever she is feeling emotions for him, when they slip up and have a kiss or two, and she always like reminds herself like, oh no, he's my nemesis. And I'm just like, but why is he your nemesis? There was a misunderstanding. You thought he was an asshole whenever he corrected you and said, I'm deaf. And you were like, oh, I had no idea. And maybe I could have tried harder than like whispered once to you. Because like that's what she did. She whispered once and she's like, oh, wow, this guy's an asshole. And didn't like try to approach him after class. She whispered during class. Some people don't talk during class. But anyway, the enemies aspect, did not like it. But I did love aspects about Willa. I love that she was a no-nonsense soccer player. I enjoy really sporty heroines, and she reminded me a lot of Sal from Culty, and I just really love that about her. Ryder was the absolute sweetest, and his family was amazing. The Bergman family, they're huge, and I think every single sibling is going to get a book. But yeah, it was mainly the enemies aspect that really bothered me about it, to the point where I was just like, I don't want to pick this book up again. It could have been such a good friends to lovers romance. It really could have, if she just would have dropped the attitude in the beginning. Like, just be like, oh, okay, well, like, let's study notes together. Become friends. He was like a former soccer player too. They have a lot in common. I just don't understand why this wasn't a friends to lovers romance, because it would have felt more natural than trying to force her to think of him as her enemy for zero reason. Okay, anyway. But I still liked the book enough to read the second one, and I really enjoyed the second one. So I guess my only other critique is that all the heroes that I've read, both the heroes that I've read have been so nice. There's nothing wrong with them. There's no flaw with the heroes, and I wish there was just a tiny bit of like flaw in them, but they're just like so nice, so lovable, so sweet, like you can't not like them, which I guess made it really hard for the enemies aspect to it. Anyway, next is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. This book started off so phenomenally. It started off with tropes that I really love, In Love with My Brother's Best Friend. And I love the heroine, Georgie. She was very unique and interesting. She was a clown. Like, this is her job, is to go to parties and like dress up as a clown. And she really enjoyed that. And I thought that was so fascinating, so interesting, but it did not work for me. The story, the romance did not work for me. I did not feel like these two should have ended up together at all. So Georgie's been in love with Travis forever. He is the best friend of her older brother, and she is treated like the kid of the family. And especially since she's a clown, her parents still think of her as like almost childish, like a kid, and Travis has treated her like that in the past as well. So I'm kind of like confused as to why she was in love with him in the first place if he treated her like a pest. Like, he definitely followed the brother's lead. So when she decides to like knock some sense into him and like make him get his life back together because he's like moping and wallowing after an injury, he starts to hang around with Georgie, and I was willing to give it the benefit of the doubt until we got into the quintessential makeover scene. Georgie likes to shop at secondhand places, and she likes comfortable clothes, and there is nothing wrong with that. She wants to be taken seriously as a businesswoman, and I understand that. I understand having like a wardrobe for like specific things that you feel like you need to look more professional for, but like she like changes her whole vibe, and she's in the middle of trying to expand her business, and I feel like after she gets this makeover, we forget about her business. Like, Georgie, did you ever find an office space? What's happening with your business, your clown business? Are you expanding? We don't care now, because now she's in a fake relationship with Travis. And I was just like sad because Georgie was the only good thing going for it. And I was just like, Georgie's the reason why I'm still reading this book, and we're forgetting about her development. And now it's becoming all about her relationship with Travis and her feelings for Travis, who absolutely does not deserve this commitment from Georgie. Spoilers for the ending. I also did not like that Travis was like completely anti-family, and then after he screwed up really bad and he has to do a big grand gesture scene, which I was like, over the top, does not make me think that you would ever commit to her just because you did something very public, and it was too much. All of a sudden he wants to be a family man, and I'm like, I would not trust that. I would not trust that suddenly he wants to have a family when he's been so against it his entire life. Like, take a breath and think about it. Maybe we'll like talk about it. Maybe you should go to therapy and talk about it. I did not think that they should have been together. Georgie deserved better. The next one I have is Meet Cute by Helena Hunting. This cover is so deceiving. It looks like this light and fluffy rom-com, and it is angst central. Trigger warning for like death of a family, like right in the beginning, death of your parents, sudden loss, grief, and becoming a sudden guardian to a young child. Like, it was so heavy. It was so heavy. Guess the reason why this cover has such a rom-com-y look about it is because the heroine Kaylin and her reaction to the hero, but it felt misplaced. Okay, now I'm getting ahead of myself. The hero, Dax, is actually a like child superstar. He was in this very popular TV show and made tons and tons and tons of money. The heroine, Kaylin, was obsessed with Dax and his character ever since she was little. They met in college because he like wanted to have like a normal life, went to college, and they had this like meet cute, which I was very embarrassed for her. By the way she was reacting to him. She was acting like a super fangirl. So she like trips over him, and then she like stumbles over him again in a class, and it was just like, it was weird. I wasn't getting like, ooh, this is such a cute meet cute. It was like, I was a little embarrassed for her. And then we fast forward to the present day, and all we know is that he did something to her when they were in college that she has never been able to forgive him for. And when we find this out, I was just like, wow. Spoiler alert, because I'm going to be talking spoilers for this book. The big conflict was that she gave him her paper to turn in, and she already like was competing with him for like the top spot in the class. And apparently he didn't turn it in on time or whatever. And so now she wasn't the top graduate in their class. And that was the conflict. It was not because she failed a class, because I would be pissed if like I asked you to do something you said you would, and then I failed the class, but just because she wasn't the top person in her class. And I was just like, wow, okay. And this, you really need to know why she hates him so much, because all of her interaction with him while he's dealing with the grief of his parents and becoming a guardian is so misplaced and so unprofessional. So she's a lawyer, and he doesn't know it's her. He just comes to this law office and, oh, what do you know? Kaylin from college. And she professes that she hates him so much, but she still has like memorabilia from all of his TV shows. Like her coffee mug, right whenever he walks in and they haven't seen each other for years, is his face, his young teenage face. And so it's like a lot of protesting too much. Like, I hate him so much. I'm like, why are you wearing his t-shirt to sleep in bed at night? Like, is this supposed to be funny? Because it's not. It's kind of a little bit creepy, to be honest. So when he comes to her and he's dealing with all this grief and needs to like make sure that his sister's money is in a trust and like make sure like all like dealing with all the things that he honestly is so overwhelmed and doesn't want to be dealing with because he just lost his parents who he had a very good relationship with, and all of a sudden he has to be his sister's guardian. And she's thinking in her head, oh, I gotta make sure that he doesn't try to steal the sister's money. And like, why does he want to be the guardian so bad? Because there's an aunt that also wants to be a guardian, and like she thinks he has like nefarious reasons for wanting to be the guardian of his little sister. And I was just like, this sucks. It's so obvious, the whole conflict that happens in the end, and it was just, I dislike this book a lot. And I felt like a little bit lied to because of the marketing. Meet cute. There was nothing like cutesy about this book. It was very sad. The hero was very sad and had to deal with his sister who was also very sad. And it was just like, oh my goodness, he became, like he was this fun brother, and then all of a sudden he has to act like the parent. And that change in their relationship really like affects her. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the dynamic between Dax and his little sister way more than I enjoyed anything else in this book. So yeah. The next book I have is A Rogue of One's Own by Evie Dunmore. I already did a whole review on like why I dislike this book a lot. So I won't go into a bunch of details. I'll actually just link that video down below. This book had lots of issues. Again, it was like an enemies to lovers romance, but the reason why Lucy considered Tristan her like childhood nemesis, like their initial like I hate you moment, it was very sad because the reader is aware of what Tristan was doing, and it was so heartbreaking because his home life is terrible. And so her reaction was very over the top, and it was about something else and not what Tristan was doing. So she hates him for a misunderstanding that happened when they were little. He didn't understand why she felt that way, so he like responded to her in kind. Like she was suddenly being so mean to him, so he did it back whenever they were kids. Anyway, the present day conflict is that they both want to own this publishing house. She wants to own this publishing house because she wants to dark horse her message about her suffragette movement to everyone, to unsuspecting people. And he wants to own it because he secretly writes poetry, and this is the publishing house that has published his works. And he needs to find a source of income that is not tied to his father, who's very controlling, abusive, an asshole, and he's trying to save his mother. So while I sympathize with her movement, I felt more sympathetic towards Tristan because it was like almost a life or death situation that he was in. So I didn't like the way that Lucy was belittling towards Tristan when she found out that he wrote poetry, like, oh, poetry is like nothing. And he was a little feminine, and I like this, and I wish that Evie Dunmore had leaned more into, is Tristan bisexual? I don't know. We just kind of like get a hint and nothing's done with it. But what I really dislike is that there was a gay character who was villainized and demonized, and I hate that. I dislike having those characters who the only motivation is like, this character doesn't want to be with me, so I'm going to ruin their life. And I'm just like, what? It was just a lot. And if you're reading this series looking for a series about like the suffragette movement and like looking for feminist romance, I just don't think that this really is the best one out there. There's some other authors who write feminist romances really well, and I don't know, I don't really love this series. Next we have The Honey Don't List by Christina Lauren. This is the last book that I read by them, and after not liking Twice in a Blue Moon and then reading The Honey Don't List, and both of them being such huge misses, I have put all Christina Lauren books, future books, on hold. Even though the newest one sounds intriguing, I'm very wary now because the last two books that I read by her have missed the mark by miles. The Honey Don't List sounded like it was going to be like right up my alley. It's heavily inspired by Chip and Joanna Gaines. I love watching Fixer Upper, I love them as a couple, and so you definitely get those vibes. The hero and the heroine are actually not like a fixer-upper couple or working together. They're the assistants to the husband and wife duo who have made like an empire on their fixer-upper show. But their marriage is like crumbling behind the scenes, and I feel like the book is way more about the husband and wife duo who have the show together, who are pretending to the world that they're this perfect couple, but behind the scenes they're not at all. They actually kind of hate each other. The book focused way more on them and their issues than the hero and the heroine, and I honestly can't even remember the hero and the heroine's name. I do remember the fixer-upper guy, Chip 2.0. What's his name? Rusty and Melissa, I want to say. I think those are their names. I can't tell you the hero and the heroine of this book's name because it wasn't about them. I was right, I just checked because I was like, did I get that couple's name right? And I still can't remember the hero and the heroine. So it's Melissa and Rusty Tripp, who are the fixer-upper couple, and Carrie is our heroine and James is our hero. Did not remember. Very little chemistry, very little heat in this book. No heat in this book. It was closed door, basically. It was like nothing. So yeah, I don't know. Y'all are gonna have to let me know if y'all are going to read the Soulmate Experiment, if it's any good, because I just haven't liked it. The last book that I liked was The Unhoneymooners and Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating. But I do wish there was more heat level for those as well. Next I have Wait For It by Amy Dawes. I remember hearing about this book and how it was inspired by the author in real life going to a mechanic shop, an auto shop, and writing a novel there. And so I was like, ooh, this sounds interesting, intriguing. The problem is I never really connected with the hero and the heroine. I remember the heroine, it's been a while. It's been like a couple years since I've read this, but I remember the heroine rubbing me the wrong way a little bit. I remember her quirky personality being like a little too over the top. But what I do remember is that the hero was pretty much the worst. I'm very open with saying that I like asshole heroes and I like a good possessive like alpha hero. Sometimes I'm into that. I equally love alphas and cinnamon roll heroes. Give them both to me. I'm in the mood for one and sometimes I'm in the mood for the other. But he gave so many mixed signals. He was like alpha possessive, but then like in the next breath had to remind her like, oh, you know that we're just friends, right? And it was just, he treated her so badly and I just didn't understand why she liked him. I didn't understand his appeal and he definitely ticked me off. And yeah, it just felt immature. Their relationship felt immature and yeah, I did not vibe with this book. Next I have Hero by Lauren Rowe, and I know a lot of people really like this series. I've heard a lot about the Morgan brothers. So I picked up Hero. It sounded really good. I am actually really into firefighter romances. And the hero gets injured in a fire and he's in the hospital and he has to go through physical therapy. And the heroine is his physical therapist. And all of that setup sounded really good and I was so into it. But the thing about it is, the heroine is a widow and she still has not moved on from her husband. And I feel like the hero of this romance was not understanding about her feelings of guilt about falling in love with like another man, and she has reservations when they get hot and heavy. She, says like, hold up, wait a minute, like I'm not ready. And I find the hero got frustrated with her for doing that, and I was not on board with the way that he felt like he was trying to push her to heal faster so that they could be together. And I was just like, that feels so wrong on so many levels. I don't like them together anymore. So that really was a turnoff for me. I just did not like the way that the hero treated the heroine in regards to her feelings of guilt of moving on. And yeah, I didn't pick up another book in this series because I was so mad at the hero for acting like that. Then we have Desperate Measures by Katie Roberts. And the premise of these books excited me so much. Disney heroines, Disney princesses ending up with the villains of their stories. Like, heck yes. I wanted to love these books so much. And it all boiled down to, I didn't feel like there was enough time invested in like their emotional chemistry together. Their sex was like off the charts hot. It was like right from the very first page. And it is a dark romance and I like dark romances, but still by the end of it, I was just like, I'm not getting they're in love at the end. I didn't get that feeling. I felt it was very sexual in nature, and I would just need just a little bit more from the emotions department. Also, the way that they did jump into a sexual relationship from basically the first page, I felt like we didn't get to know the characters enough for me to just be invested with them. I wanted to get to know them and their motivations before, because like, why would I care if they're sleeping together if I don't know anything about them? And that's just kind of how I felt. I'm like, oh, so we're going off, I don't know anything about this like world, because it felt fantastical, and I don't know if it's because it has like a lot of like mafia elements in it. So it felt like they were like in this strange alternate universe, this strange world, or like the city just run by mobsters or whatever. And so I don't know, I just felt like there wasn't enough lead up to that first scene, and I didn't feel like we got enough about the characters themselves after that. I just didn't connect with them. Then we have Marriage for One by Ella Maze, I don't know how you say her last name. I saw a ton of people recommend Ella Maze, and this is the first one that I ever picked up by her, Marriage for One, and it just did not work with me for a lot of reasons. The heroine is set to inherit this property, but there's a weird stipulation in the will that the property goes to whoever her fiance is. So not her relative literally willed a building to her fiance. And like, it didn't even specify, because she did have a fiance at one point. Didn't even specify him by name. Weirdly just said her fiance. Very weird. Who would let him write a will like that? But anyway, so her fiance inexplicably dumps her, and she's a little heartbroken about that. But Jack, who is a lawyer at this firm, offers his services to her, being like, I'll marry you so that you can inherit this property. And spoilers for like the ending and the twist or whatever, if you haven't read this book. I got blatant stalker vibes from Jack right from the beginning, because one of their first introductions is just kind of like, yeah, we met before. And like, oh yeah, that first time that we met, whatever, like yeah. And she never followed that thread. And he gave her all the clues that they have met before. And apparently you made an impression on him, Rose, you made an impression on Jack enough that he's like volunteering as tribute to marry you so that you can inherit your property. So I got some weird vibes from him. Not only did I not like Jack because I was getting those vibes, I was already like, oh, he did something heinous, didn't he, that we're gonna have to forgive him for. I just didn't feel like, it was very boring. The pacing was very slow. There was lots of apartment scenes that felt very repetitive. Like nothing was happening, but they were in the apartment and they were leaving for the day. A lot. I was like, why do we have to have this scene so many times? She apologized a lot. I do remember the heroine apologizing a lot, saying like, I'm sorry, and the hero was like, nothing to apologize for. I'm just like, why is she apologizing all the time? And when it comes to the big reveal of what Jack did, Jack paid off the ex-fiance to break up with Rose. One, because he liked Rose, and two, because of course the fiance was doing shady things, and instead of telling Rose, showing her his evidence, being like, your fiance is terrible, here's the proof of why, and he doesn't really love you, whatever, he decides that he was just going to take care of it himself, because she wouldn't believe him even though he had evidence of the boyfriend's duplicity. And I was just like, so we're just gonna assume that she doesn't have the smarts to figure out that her boyfriend is lying about being in love with her and just using her. She's just not smart enough to come to that conclusion when provided evidence. And I was just like, wow, okay. So I did not like them as a couple at all. I was like, run far away from Jack. I did not like them together. Next we have A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Snyder. And I saw so many people really love this book. And I went in knowing that it was going to be a little bit heartbreaking, because I've seen people saying like, oh my goodness, you know, my heart, like it hurt, but like it was so good, it was so worth it. And if you don't know me, I have a certain tolerance for angst, and like I have a sweet spot, and no telling if a book is going to hit my sweet spot or not, or be too much. And this book ended up by being too much. This had a trope, which I like to call, it's been 84 years, and it is characters who spend decades going back and forth on will they, won't they, will they be together now, and oops, no, not this time, and it takes so long for them to get on the same page. By that point, I'm like, y'all shouldn't be together. And that's how I felt. And it wasn't like they had some sort of connection when they were young or at one point, and then a decade passed, and then now they've reconnected. I mean, they have had so many opportunities to be together, and they self-sabotaged and were just very immature, and I don't know. They just like made their lives very hard, especially when it came to their relationship. I just really was intrigued by the setup in the beginning of the hero seeing the heroine and her best friend walking, and the hero's gaze went to her best friend, and so they started dating, and I'm like, ooh, forbidden romance. I'm in love with my best friend's boyfriend. And that really wasn't the main conflict. That was like a part of the conflict in the beginning, but the rest was they were the problem. They got in their own way of being in a relationship with each other. And I was just like, by the end of the book, I was like, I don't care that y'all are together. Y'all put me through hell, and I don't think y'all should be together because y'all are a little toxic together. So I just was so mad at this book at the end, and I can see why other people liked it, but I just feel like they had too many opportunities and it didn't work out. And I'm just like, the way that they handled the situations does not make me confident that if they have a problem in their relationship in the future, that it'll be handled well. I feel like they would just be like, okay, no, we're done. No relationship, no marriage, divorce. I still feel a little salty about this when I read it this year, so I was like very fresh in my mind. Okay, and the last one is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Why can't I say that last name? The premise is cool. I like the son of the president and the son of a monarchy. I'm pretty sure it was England, but they're not the monarchs that are in England. They're not the Windsors, okay? It's not the Windsor family. Though very reminiscent of the Windsor family, by the way. But anyway, I like that dynamic. I like that setup. There's a bit of like enemies to lovers about it, parts about it. But what I didn't really love was Alex. He was the hero that I did not connect with. I felt like he was very immature. He felt very young. He felt like a 17-year-old for some reason. And I just didn't understand why the character was written in such an immature way, because Alex and his sister are involved with their mother's political campaign. Like, they have positions of power within her campaign, and the way that they were acting just didn't seem like they were mature enough to be part of this team. It felt very much like teenagers were in charge of some very important things and had responsibilities that I was like, are you sure that you're emotionally mature enough to handle all this? But I did like the premise. I was kind of a little bit confused because there was some real life political figures that were mentioned, but yet the monarchy in the UK was not the Windsors. So it was like a weird mesh of, this is an alternate universe with like political figures that you don't recognize. Like, they're all made up in a made up monarchy in the UK. It was like a mix of like, this is real, but this is different. I don't know. I didn't like that. I like all or nothing. Either base it in the real world and make them the royal house of some made-up country in Europe. Make everything up, and the political figures are not familiar. They're not familiar names. But anyway, and then I have an honorable mention, and it's not because I hated this book. I gave this book 5 stars. It was the fact that this book was like given to me as a please read my favorite romance of all time, and it wasn't just by one person, it was by a lot of people. Lots of people were like, please do this on the podcast, and this was last year. But I had to mention It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I loved this book. Like, this book was so well written and good, and I was so invested with this book and these characters, so invested. But as a romance, it fell extremely flat, and I don't think it is a romance. I think it's more women's fiction with a love story that just so happens to be in there. Atlas, oh, my sweet angel. He is so amazing. I love his character so much. He and Lily, you get to know Lily when she is a teenager, and there is this boy who everyone like makes fun of because he doesn't smell nice and he looks all worn and ratty, and she discovers that he's homeless and he's living in like the abandoned house behind her own house. They strike up a friendship, and it touches my heart so much just like thinking about this. Atlas and Lily become like really good friends, and of course she's a little in love with him, and they're young. But trigger warning for anybody for domestic abuse and rape for this book. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that. So Lily, and also spoilers for the book, because I can't not talk about spoilers and explain why I was disappointed by the end of this book because it was marketed to me as a romance. So Lily's mom is being abused by the dad, and Lily is adamant that she will never be put in that position, that she would never be like her mom. After a bunch of things happen, like the father does not want Atlas to be with Lily, and Atlas leaves, and I think he joins the army, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, they're separated. Lily moves on. She meets this guy named Ryle. Ryle? I believe it's Ryle. And he seems like he's charming. He seems a little bit brooding, and they strike up a romance. And I'm just like, I started to be confused because it's like, oh wait, is this a romance with Ryle? Like, but who's he? Where's Atlas? No, don't fall in love with someone else. Well, Lily falls in love with Ryle, and then he starts displaying some very worrying and troublesome signs that he is abusive. And I feel like it's a women's fiction because it's ironic that Lily grew up in a household and witnessed abuse and said like that would never be her, and then she ends up in an abusive relationship. And it illustrates very eloquently how the signs are kind of hard to pick out at first, and how once you like forgive and said I'll give you one more chance, once you do that, it's harder to leave after a certain point. And I feel like Colleen Hoover did a fantastic job at that. It was so awesome and so heartbreaking. But the fact that she stays with Ryle, and at one point he rapes her, like they're married, and he full on rapes her. She ends up by getting pregnant, and then she just so happens to like run into Atlas like years later, and he's like successful, he's back, and he like owns a restaurant. Well, she runs to Atlas because Atlas knows her history and like kind of is like, not protect me, but like give me a place to stay. She finds out she's pregnant, and for some god-awful reason in the end, she like still agrees to like have Ryle. She like forgives him enough to be comfortable being alone with him in a room. And I was so turned off. I was so mad about that. I was like, no, don't be in a room with your abuser of years and your rapist. And she was just like, but it's the father of my child. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care at all. And I was very disappointed that there was really no romance between Lily and Atlas as adults, because she was dealing with a lot of shit. She was dealing with Ryle being abusive, dealing with being pregnant, and also being the best friend of Ryle's sister. That was like another connection between her and Ryle. Her and the sister were very close. But I would have absolutely phenomenally, even like 5+ starred this book if there would have been more romance between Atlas and Lily, if Atlas would have come in on the scene a lot earlier and we got to explore them getting to know each other again. Because the very ending of this book, where like she kind of forgets that Atlas just helped her escape her abusive husband enough to feel safe, she kind of like forgets about him and just kind of like, okay, well, I got stuff to worry about, thanks for helping me. And then at the very end, she like walks by him on the street and they like smile at each other, and I'm just like, what is this? I was like, where is the romance? So anyway, I just wanted to mention that if I didn't like really love her writing style, I would have given this book a low rating as a romance, because it was not where was the romance between Atlas and Lily. But anyway, so guys, those are all the books that I believe are pretty popular, and I've seen a lot of people really love them, and I was just like, for some reason or another, it did not mesh well with me, and I did not get the same feelings of joy and enjoyment from the characters or the story or the writing. Again, like I said, it's just my opinion, And if this was one of your favorite books of all time, I hope that you're not offended, because I know a lot of people, even people who I normally have very similar reading tastes to, we don't agree on every single book. That would be impossible to like every single book as everyone else. So if you don't like a book that I rave about and love, I'm okay with that, and I hope you're okay with me not liking some books that you really love. But yeah, I enjoy civil debate on differences of opinion. I actually find it very fascinating reading about differing opinions and how certain scenes affect people differently in interpretations. Even Juliet and I, who do the podcast together, and all we do is positive reviews, because I know that negative reviews are very polarizing. There's a reason why we only do positive reviews on the podcast. We don't want to like bash authors and on the podcast, and I don't want to bash any authors in this video either. This was just purely like I did not like the book. But I know it's like kind of like disappointing and sad when you recommend a book that you really love and the person you recommended it to is just like, I didn't like it. I totally get it. I totally get it. I've been there. So if you want to tell me a book that I really love that you disliked and you want to say it in the comments, go for it. And I am by no means trying to change your opinion on any of these books if you do like them. To each their own, and that's the beauty of reading. There's so many books out there, and if something's not for you, then there's a book out there that is for you and you will like better. Alright guys, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe to get notified of any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.